Hey guys, it's Ben here with the Half Court Heave podcast. We're back after a long break. We've been here doing a lot of work, and we finally got our time to get back on the grind, and we're back stronger than ever. We'll be bringing a lot of episodes to you guys in a lot of better quantity too. And it's Ben here. I'm here with Isaac. I'm here with Arjun, and there's been a lot that's been happening in the NBA recently and the NFL, and those things are talking about the Jazz, who have been coming on a it's not a 20 game win streak, but it's 20 out of the last 21 games they have won. So Isaac, my question to you is Donovan Mitchell in the MVP race right now?
So looking at this from a statistical standpoint, he has the best team in the NBA in terms of record and arguably outside of record too. He's putting up really good stats. He's leading his team to that spot in the West, that spot in the league. But you have to look at the MVP conversation from more than a statistical standpoint. No, I don't think Donovan Mitchell is yet in the MVP conversation. Now, this season is not insignificant for him. This is going to be a big year to prove to guys that have been questioning him his whole career. Like, didn't Shaq on the other night on Inside the NBA, Shaq was questioning his talent as a star in the NBA. This is definitely putting those guys to silence. This is definitely proving that he is meant to be up there with those guys. But no, I don't think he is the most valuable player in the NBA. Even if statistics show that, he's just not in that conversation.
So statistically, if you look at the numbers, I think you don't mean a statistical message. You mean like team record. Yes, the Jazz are the number one seed in the West, and they're by a couple of games, and at this point in the season, a couple of games is a big margin for a lead. They have the best record in the NBA. So when you look at the past winners of this award, it was 10 of the last 12 MVPs have been the best player on the best statistical team record-wise in the NBA. And I know Donovan Mitchell's averaging 24, 4, and 5, and it's a statistical award. It's not an eye test award, and his stats aren't comparable to guys like Joel Embiid or Stephen Curry or Jokic. And I don't put him in the top 3, maybe top 5, but I think he absolutely has to be in this conversation right now because the award in the past has always, or not always, but 10 out of the last 12 has gone to the best player on the best team. And some other questionable MVP awards that were given to the guys with the lower stats who it kind of proves my point here. You look at 2014, 2015 Curry, that first Warriors championship team. He put up 24, 7, and 4. Is that leader MVP numbers? Like, he's up there, but like that's not crazy numbers. But you look at the fact that they were the 1 seed. They were the number 1 record in the NBA. In 2006, Steve Nash, one of his 2 MVPs, he put up 15, 3, and 11. You were like, whoa, Kobe didn't get that award? Tim didn't get that award? No, it was Steve Nash. He put up 15 and 11, which is not MVP numbers, but the fact that he led Phoenix to 62 wins is what got him that award. It's not. I think that Curry is obviously more valuable to his team, and you look at a guy like Nikola Jokic, who's the 8th seed in the West right now, he's more valuable to his team. But when it comes down to purely how the award is given out, Mitchell is in this conversation above guys like Curry and Jokic because of that.
Okay, I have to really Arjun, before you jump in, I just want to throw in there that I think it's about the most valuable player, and he's just not the most valuable for his team. Taking him away from the Jazz does less damage than taking other players away from their teams that are at the top of the NBA.
Yeah, I don't think that that Mitchell is even the most impactful on his team, and we've come down to the fact, and we've seen that that's really not what the award is about. It's not 100% who's the best record and who's their best player, but that contributes a lot to it. And when you look at guys like Curry, who are the 7, 8 seed in the West, you can't win the award like that because it's based off a lot of team success.
The thing is that you said it yourself. I mean, the NBA does that. Sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes it shouldn't be done. Like Steve Nash, I guarantee you a lot of people will say that he shouldn't have won that award over Kobe. But if you look at it from a pure standpoint, this Jazz team, their success hasn't hinged on Donovan Mitchell, who has 24 points per game, but that's on 42% shooting. I mean, he's got an efficiency rating of 18. He's not putting up great defensive stats. And you just look at this overall value to the team. He is somewhat replaceable in a way where You know, you have Clarkson, you have Conley, you have so many scores in that team. And I don't want to, okay, that was a bit of a stretch, but if you just look at it, he's not more valuable to his team than Jokic. He's not more valuable to his team than LeBron.
Yeah,
not
and
more
I agree with
Giannis, KD, Curry, or Embiid.
I agree with you. Donovan Mitchell isn't near the value to his team that those guys bring to the table. But what I'm looking at, like, if I could choose who's the most valuable player right now, I would say it's Stephen Curry because of what he's doing. But that's not what the award bases the award off. I'm going too literal here, where I'm saying that he would win. He's more likely to win the award than Jokic because Jokic is at the 8th seed, and the 8th seed doesn't win a lot of MVP awards because you're not high in the standings. I do agree. Jokic is way more valuable to his team. I think Donovan Mitchell, you could put up in air, is he more valuable than Rudy Gobert? And I would say no, but Donovan Mitchell's putting up the best numbers on this team, and he's on the best team in the NBA. That's why I have to put him into at least the top 7 of the MVP awards. And I don't think I can put Curry or Jokic above him because of where they are.
But when you talk about how good the team is, you're talking about they're the number 1 team in the NBA. He has to be of greatest value to his team, comparable to those other guys, because it doesn't mean that much that the Jazz is ahead of teams like the Nuggets, the Trailblazers, the Warriors, all of which whom have MVP contenders on them right now, if he's not the most valuable to his team, or if he's not the guy that stands out as he's the one that's getting them there.
I mean, he really is. I think that's why this question is being able to be posed, because Donovan Mitchell is doing this. He is, I mean, like Rudy Gobert is the sidekick there, and he's doing what you need him to do. He's having a really underappreciated impact ever since his big contract. But in reality, Donovan Mitchell, again, I don't think I think right now the most valuable player, it has to go to Embiid at this point. Nobody debates that. I can't put KD up there because he has 2 other superstars. I've said this before. I think Kawhi Leonard's above him. I think there's a couple of guys that are above him, but I think you have to put him in the top 7, not based off what you think, because I don't think he's a top 7 most valuable player if you look at the name. But if you're looking at what they give the award off of, he's definitely up there. But
so sometimes that's controversial. I mean, you said it. The question begs, who should get the MVP? And sometimes the NBA doesn't really follow that. Who should get the MVP should hinge on the total team success should definitely play a big factor. But if you look at just if Donovan Mitchell continues, say he drops down to 22 points per game, say the other players scoring goes up, and he's playing well, but say the team is just on a roll and Donovan Mitchell isn't having to drop like 30 points.
That's a complete hypothetical that's out of the question. I mean, if Donovan Mitchell fell off and his teammates went up and his team was still winning and he was playing bad, obviously he would fall out of it. But right now, because if he fell to 22 and he wasn't playing that well and Rudy Gobert would have to play well for that team to succeed, that's a hypothetical that's out of the question. It's where does he stand in the MVP race right now and what the NBA grades off of to give the award. I would say Mitchell is high. In my personal rankings, he's not in the top 15, but really, when you look at how they give the award off, in my opinion, I think that he will end up, if the season ended right now, he would end up in the top 7. But the next thing I want to talk about is the Jazz again, but this time is it the Jazz or the field that is the biggest threat to beat the Lakers this season? Arjun, give me your thoughts on this.
I think the Jazz are the biggest threat to the Lakers as of now, because if you just look at them, they beat the 76ers the other day, but it's not just another regular season game. It shows you how good their weapons are. I mean, their depth rivals the Lakers. They've got Jordan Clarkson, who had 40 the other night. He is a bench player and he has 40 points. You've got Joe Ingles, who can drop 20, Bogdanovich, Gobert, who knows his role. And the most dangerous thing about this Jazz team is that everybody knows their role. Gobert doesn't need to have 15 points per game to live up to his contract. He averages like 11, and that's because he knows his role. And the thing about this Jazz team is that they're 4th in offensive rating, they're 2nd in defensive rating. And the thing about this team is that they are great at getting at the line. And the one thing that can really stop this Lakers team is foul trouble. I mean, they're a pretty unstoppable team, and this Jazz team can do that.
All right, no. Okay, so you brought up about bench scoring, foul trouble. I think first off, just getting this off the bat, when I compare this, I'm not comparing this current Jazz team to AD, how he started the season, because he started the season not even playing like an all-star. I'm comparing these two teams 100% healthy, 100% COVID-free, 100% playing at 100% like we know them. Like AD would be back to AD that we used to know last season, that he hasn't been this season, and he's back from his injury that'll hold him out 2 weeks with his calf. But I don't think this is the Jazz. I think the Jazz are up there and they're getting their respect finally. But I mean, really looking at it, I have to give it to the Clippers. I can't go with the Nets here. The Nets have no defense. They have a really lackluster bench. And the 3 stars can't be compromisable, but the rest of the team compromises itself. But when it comes down to the Clippers, why I think the Clippers are here, they are the best scoring bench in the NBA right now. There's no denying that. I mean, I think they're second or third in bench scoring total, and they're one of the highest shooting teams off the bench. And when it comes to, you said the most important thing to slowing those two down in LeBron and Anthony Davis is foul trouble. But really, the thing that would slow them down is the 2 best defenders that you can pair up to stop those 2. And you can't stop those 2, but the 2 best defenders to be able to limit LeBron and AD are Kawhi and Paul George. We never got to see them do it in the playoffs, but Royce O'Neal and Rudy Gobert, they're great defenders. Royce O'Neal's a great defender. He's really underappreciated, but he's not doing anything to LeBron James. Kawhi, we know Kawhi can do a little something to LeBron James. Maybe he can switch on to Anthony Davis. You put on Paul George onto him. Maybe you keep Kawhi on LeBron and you put Serge Ibaka on AD for a couple minutes. This team has defensive weapons. They have great depth. They have Paul George finally playing a lot better than he was last season. Kawhi being up there, probably top 3 in MVP awards. And I think I have to give it to the Clippers because people have really forgotten how good that team is because of their playoff run last year. Both of these 2 teams blew 3-1 leads last year.
Yeah, Ben, the Clippers certainly have an advantage in a way that might not be understood because I feel like no one is focusing on them at all. The focus right now is on the Lakers. AD's injured. Obviously, always focus is going to be on LeBron. Focus is on the Nets because they're having their issues. They're having their successes. They have the 3 of the best players in the league there. Focus has almost not at all been on the Clippers. Almost no one's talking about Kawhi and Paul George. They are actually playing very well this year. Their chemistry, like I said, that was their big problem last year, is getting much better. It is getting much better. They are a huge threat to them. I'm going to go with the Nets because I think their firepower is too much to hold back. They're not clicking well on defense at all, but I think they're going to get there because if those guys, I'm not saying they do, but if those guys don't understand their roles, each of those 3 guys, to play defense, to step back a little bit, then they're screwed because they've gone all the way in on this. And Kyrie has already made concessions, which is not something we've seen him do in the past as much as many people have liked to. He made a concession. He told James Harden, go ahead, you're my point guard. And I think that mindset is going to lead them to being a better defensive team. I think they're going to click more, and they just have by far the most firepower in the NBA to take down the Lakers.
No, absolutely not. Because we've seen teams that can outscore the Lakers. That's not like a thing that you really can't do. The real problem here is that you have, before this season, you have 2 top 5, maybe even top 3 players in the NBA that you're going against, including 2 amazing playoff players and arguably the greatest of all time who's still playing prime basketball and also a deep bench, also a great team. If you're not looking to outscore this team because this team has defense too. This team has offense and defense. You have to be able to somewhat guard LeBron and Anthony Davis. The Nets could somehow, maybe, if everything goes perfect and they sign a couple guys, maybe get JaVale McGee via trade, maybe Blake Griffin and Andre Drummond are bought out, you get both of them, you'll have an average defense. This defense in the Nets that the Nets have right now is atrocious. DeAndre Jordan would be a good piece on defense 5 years ago. Jeff Green and DeAndre and Kevin Durant are sharing spots at the 5 sometimes. That's not winning you a championship. No matter how much talent you have on your team, you need defense, especially against LeBron and Anthony Davis. And it just so happens that the Nets' biggest problem is not perimeter defense, but it's paint defense. And now you have Anthony Davis, arguably the best big in the league, and you have to stop him with the worst paint defense in the NBA. And I just can't ever see that happening.
And the thing is that you compared this Clippers team to the Jazz team defense-wise. If you look at the Lakers as a team, they're mostly gonna hurt you in the paint. Kawhi can guard LeBron, and Kawhi's a terrific defender. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the top defenders in the NBA. But when it comes to LeBron going full steam at you, there is not a lot you can do to stop that. And if you look at the paint, Rudy Gobert knows his role. He's not going to go he is not going to be a huge offensive presence. He'll get some lobs, he'll get some putback shots, but he is going to conserve most of his energy on the defensive end. And on the offensive end, he's going to set screens and get like easy, high percentage shots. So if you look at the chemistry too, and you look at the people that they know their role, this defense is arguably they could arguably be better than the Clippers because they have that kind of depth and they have that kind of mindset.
Okay, overall defense, you're correct. No, overall defense, you're correct. I think there's absolutely a way that you can say that the Jazz are a better defensive team than the Clippers. They have Mike Conley, who's not by far, but he's their best perimeter defender. They have Royce O'Neal, one of the most underappreciated defenders in the league. He's straight up clamps on almost anybody. You have Rudy Gobert. Of course, Rudy Gobert. We all know what he does defensively. He's Defensive Player of the Year right now. You have Donovan Mitchell holding his own. And you have decent defense off your bench too. So, I mean, that defense overall is great. But what I really focus on is Dennis Schroeder. It can give you 17 to 20. That's not a concern. The concern is slowing down Anthony Davis and LeBron James as much as you can. And the people with the two best stoppers of LeBron and Anthony Davis that you could realistically picture together are Kawhi and Paul George. They're on the same team, and they have it on both ends. They picked up Luke Kennard. He wasn't the all-star point guard they wanted, but they have a decent bench. They have Markieff Morris. You saw this bench team that didn't have Kawhi, PG, and I don't think they had Lou or Pat Bev either, and they beat the Miami Heat, who have been on fire recently. So this bench is better than the Jazz bench, I would say. They're definitely a better scoring bench, and when it comes to stopping LeBron and Anthony Davis, they are a better defense than the Jazz. Total defense is a different story.
Okay, but I have to mention, to Arjun's point about the Jazz, they are a great matchup for the Lakers, surprisingly enough. I don't think anyone thought we'd be saying this last year when we looked at the Jazz, how they were playing last year. They are clicking like every team in the NBA hopes to click as a team. They're arguably the most complete team in the NBA. They're playing so well. Like you said, Arjun, like everyone knows their role. They're pretty much doing very well in every area that the Nets are lacking, which is what I want to go back to. I know what you said. I understand both of your concerns about the Nets, the concerns about defense, and that they really just don't have great defense on the inside. But I just think that they are a good matchup for the Lakers, and that they need to understand how they're going to match up with teams like that, because it's going to get real really soon. Otherwise, they're just not going to have any success, not just this year, but in the next couple of years. And I just think that they can get it done. I think they have to get it done. And they understand that because they're all in places in their career where this is a really important season for all of them.
Okay, yeah, I think what's so special about this Jazz team is that what gave them an advantage over the other teams, especially in this type of season, is that coming into this offseason, a lot of teams made a lot of big moves. Like you saw the Suns, they traded for CP3, and you saw, of course, the Nets, they traded for Harden mid-season. In a season where you really can't be with your teammates, the Jazz can join a team that was all together last season, and then the only addition, they sent out Tony Bradley to Philly, and they picked up Derek Favors, who was an ex-Jazz player earlier in his career. I mean, the chemistry is on point, and they clicked earlier than other teams got to click, and I think that's why they're performing so well. But also, that's not the demise of them, but I think that a big thing about them is that now other teams, they'll be able to catch up with them in time, and that's what gave the Jazz got their advantage from having their success early in a season and having the chemistry early in the season. And a team like the Clippers, they haven't had the chemistry to click. They haven't had the time to click their chemistry. Same with the Lakers, same with a ton of other teams like the Nets especially. And now teams will be able further down the season to be able to connect with their teammates, and like the Jazz have already preseason, they'll finally be caught up with and maybe fall to like the 3 or the 4 seed.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, they're playing really good. And also, to go back to our last topic, it's a testament to how hard Donovan Mitchell has worked as a player. He has gotten a lot of criticism. You can even call him an underrated player, not because no one's talking about him, but because people don't recognize him for his true talent. It's a testament to his skill, also to their work as a team when they've had unsuccessful postseasons, to be able to come there and prove to everyone that they can click as a team, that they can play well together. And knowing your role is one of the most important things in the NBA as a team. And to be able to do that now, they're really impressive for them that we're even talking about them competing with the Lakers.
Isaac, I'm going to bring up the next topic. The next topic I'll ask you. What do you think is the main problem, the main reason for the recent struggles of the Celtics?
Yeah, so this is something I've been thinking about a lot, and a lot of people are going to point to specific players, and I think a lot of eyes are shifted towards Kemba. This seems like something that the Celtics have gone through before with Kyrie Irving, where there's an injury or there seems to be a disconnect from your highly paid point guard. From Kyrie Irving, there was a disconnect between their young players and him. There seems to be a similar disconnect with Kemba Walker. But I'm going to chalk this up to injuries because that's what it is. Jason Tatum was injured. For a while, they had to skip out in some games because they had 8 players available. Jason Tatum was injured. Jaylen Brown was injured. Recently, Kemba has just come off injury. Smart is still not playing for them. He's kind of the binder. He's the glue for that team. It's certainly for injuries. And I think Kemba Walker can still play a good role in this team. I think he's going to bounce back from the struggles he's had recently. And I think the Celtics are going to bounce back too because they can compete really well in the East and in the league. But they have to be able to mesh as a team. Once they're fully healthy, I think they can start to do that, but injuries have really slowed them down.
All right, no. So, of course, you can pick injuries. You can pick COVID, and that's kind of just boring to me because obviously they've struggled from COVID issues and injury issues. Kemba had his stem cell injury in his knee, and that hurt them for the first part of the season. And especially when he came back, he hurt them more than when he wasn't there. And he's kind of came back in the past couple of games. But what it really comes down to, just not injury-wise, is that their roster just isn't good enough at this point for me to think that, of course, I think they're a better than above 500 team, but I think people really underestimate what Gordon Hayward leaving for nothing did to that team. That was a big blow to them. And a lot of people thought it was just going to be nothing because now Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum can take over that. They've taken big leaps and they still haven't filled the void that Gordon Hayward had filled in there. And I think that for the Celtics to compete in the future, they have to make moves. I'm not saying they have to get Drummond because Drummond isn't the absolute need. I think the biggest need right now is bench scoring and bench help, especially because that bench is terrible. Grant Williams, Semi Ojeleye, Peyton Pritchard's very good for what they drafted him at, but their bench is really atrocious for a team that's trying to compete for something. I don't see them competing for anything until they make moves. Marcus Smart obviously is the glue of this team. I would say he's the third most important piece on this team over Kemba, but in reality, this team really just isn't good enough. They don't have enough. Tristan Thompson was a complete blow of a signing. His defense is terrible for a center, and their bench is just not what it needs to be. So I think Danny Ainge has to get on the phone, make some moves. They could have had Miles Turner, and they rejected it, and that was the biggest blow to the Celtics. But I think the biggest blow to them not succeeding this season is just not having enough of a good roster to compete.
See, I think that they have the roster. I think you're wrong about that. Obviously, they have always lacked bench scoring. They did get rid of Hayward, but I mean, they have Robert Williams, who is a very young center, and he can give you the scoring, he can give you the defense. But the problem with this team right now is obviously injuries. But I think that one thing that needs to be held accountable is Brad Stevens. Brad Stevens has not made good choices when it comes to lineup changes. He's a terrific coach, but there's a point where we have to draw the line. And I think that he keeps messing with the roster. He keeps messing with the rotations, trying out new things, and it's really messed with chemistry. And obviously, since Kemba's come back, they haven't meshed together as a team. And I think Brad's consistency, the fact that he preaches so much consistency, is kind of thrown off this team. He hasn't really adapted. He hasn't really done well enough to try and bring this team back. Obviously, they've had a lot of injuries, but I think that the fact that he's not playing Aaron Naismith, his earliest pick, the fact that he's not playing him, the fact that Robert Williams isn't getting enough minutes, and the fact that Tristan Thompson is an absolute bum. I mean, he was the center I thought we needed, but if you watch him, he is maybe one of the worst defending centers in this league.
I think he is actually the worst defending center in this league. I've been watching these games, and I mean, the more I watch Tristan Thompson, he's not what I or really anyone else really thought Tristan Thompson was. I think that really goes under the water it's just how bad of a defender he is. He's a great rebounder. He's a great rebounding piece, but he's kind of just like, he's like a worse version of Enes Kanter when he was on the Celtics. It was really an overrated pickup to the maximum. And I think another thing, and I'm a Hornets fan, I'm a Charlotte guy, so like getting on Kemba Walker is something that I don't like to do. But even with Kemba Walker back, a thing that has to be mentioned about the Celtics is I think that Kemba Walker is hurting the team when in the long run and winning right now, where you're holding back Jaylen Brown, not as much Jason Tatum, but Jaylen Brown especially, from getting the shots he needs to really be a superstar and get into the 27 points per game he was putting up before Kemba Walker came back. If you can trade Kemba, and maybe hopefully include Tristan Thompson in that deal, get somebody even like Steven Adams or Wendell Carter Jr. Just get somebody who can hold somewhat of their own in the paint. Get rid of Kemba. Don't use Jeff Teague. Jeff Teague is terrible for the Celtics. So you need to get a point guard who's suitable. He doesn't have to be an all-star like Kemba. You should have kept Rozier. I'm super grateful that you guys made that trade because, again, I am a Hornets fan. Hornets definitely won that trade. And I think just get rid of Kemba, get paint defense, and get somewhat of a bench. Don't use guys like Grant Williams. And I know you said Aaron Nesmith. Aaron Nesmith is terrible. We've seen him play. He needs development. He's a project. But I think that they need scoring and they need defense, and that's what's held them back. But the next thing we do want to talk about here is which team is more likely to make the playoffs and which team do you think will be better suited to make the playoffs this year, the Pelicans or the Mavericks? Arjun.
I'm going to go with the Mavericks right here because if you look at the Pelicans right now, they're not playing well as a team, and they're 9th in field goal percentage. All their players are playing pretty well. I mean, JJ Redick, with the exception of JJ Redick scoring, I mean, Zion and Brandon Ingram. Zion is going on an absolute tear. It's sad that, he's not getting the same media coverage. We all know why he's not getting the same media coverage. But he's been going on a tear. Brandon Ingram's been going on a tear. And I think Lonzo Ball has not really found his rhythm yet. But as a team, they're playing well. They're in a way, they're all shooting well. And the fact that their record doesn't reflect that really shows that they're not really a playoff team. I mean, this Mavericks team last year was a 7th seed. They improved their roster. If anything, they improved their roster because they got defense from Josh Richardson, and they're just not playing well as a team right now. I think there's a lot of improvement. You have a great owner, you have a great coach, and I think they could definitely make some moves, and I think they'll really pick up the slack.
Okay, I think that you said that they have a great owner and a great coach. I think the great coach is something that really holds back the Mavericks in this argument is that Steve Van Gundy's been terrible this year. He's been making Lonzo Ball play the 2. He's been using Zion super incorrectly. Zion still flourishing no matter what role he's playing in, even if it's the super incorrect role. Brandon Ingram, none of the team is really being used correctly. And you have Steven Adams and Zion on the floor at the same time, which is decent, but it's not what you should be doing for a majority of the game because that's not great spacing. But I mean, you look at their total year, and that's not what you want to look at. You want to look at their recent games when Lonzo Ball has finally been able to run the offense of some sorts. Van Gundy's kind of let off the pedal of being a terrible coach. He's still not being a great coach, but the talent in the Pelicans is obviously there. I don't know the overall team talent on both ends of the basketball that the Mavericks actually have. I mean, Josh Richardson, he's been held back from coronavirus more than any other player in the NBA. Not absolutely, but I mean, he's obviously up there, and guys who's been held back, he's barely been able to play. But really, I mean, we saw what Seth Curry's doing there. We saw what Seth Curry's doing in Philly, and Josh Richardson, his defense isn't terrific. It's good, but Seth Curry, he might not be a great defender, but he at least brings offense. Last year, the Mavericks, the reason they made the playoffs, they still had a bad defense, but their offense was like record-breaking amazing. So it was kind of just like they evened out right in the middle. This year, their offense is a little above average, and their defense is still bad. I think Kristaps Porzingis is a terrible defender. I think it's really his defense is for some reason overshadowed by his offense. People don't really see, he kind of just plays like a big, small forward. And I think that I have to go with the Pelicans here because I think they have a more complete roster. And the more that their complete roster gets to play the ways they want to, not being held back by Van Gundy, is the more that they succeed and they get closer to the playoffs.
Yeah. Ben, the problem is that way. I want to say it to me quickly, but even if Porzingis isn't that great of a defensive IQ wise, he's still a 7-footer that you have in the paint. That's still a weapon that you can utilize. On the defensive end.
The only way he's an average, the only place he's an average defender is in the paint, and that's from literally just standing there. I mean, this is an eye test thing. If you look at the player who's playing, him hedging off screens, he's not a good defender. He's terrible anywhere outside of the paint when he's defending. He's average at best in the paint. And I think that their defense is atrocious and their offense is fine. Like Luka and Porzingis are really the only standouts on offense. And I think that the Pelicans have the more complete roster with young players who can show up more overall than just Luka and Kristaps with the
Also, this is like a lot of these topics are comparisons to last year. I think it's totally fair to say that Philly totally won that trade with Josh Richardson and Seth Curry. Seth Curry is playing much better for them, and he was the piece that they really needed. Remember, in this offseason, everyone was saying that Luka would be the MVP. I'm pretty sure he had the betting odds. Right now, he is not in the top, 4 in the conversation. People are throwing out different names. He's not there because the Mavs are not there. Their defense is still bad, like you guys said. But also, both of these teams are teams that after last year's postseason, we said they're going to be much better this year. For the Pelicans, we said now Zion's going to be healthy. Brandon Ingram was most improved player of the year. Those guys are going to, if they can click together, if Lonzo can click, if all of their pieces can play well together, they're going to be very good. And the Mavericks, after saying, oh, they almost beat the Clippers in the first round or whatever, right? They're going to be much better this year. Both teams have far underperformed. I'm going with the Mavericks because I think that their problems are more easily fixable than the Pelicans are. Like you said, I think it's miscoaching from the Pelicans, but also it's just that it's hard for all of those guys to click together. They all need different things, and it's just hard for them to play together. I think with the Mavs I think the Mavs can make an adjustment and get better, and the Pelicans have farther to go.
Actually, you said true things in that, but I have to disagree with how the outcome will come out of that, because you said like the Mavericks they have the better coach. Obviously, Van Gundy is a terrible coach, or for the Pelicans at least. He could be a better coach somewhere else, fine by me if he actually was. But for the Pelicans, I've been watching a lot of Pelicans games recently. The Pelicans, they have the talent on both sides of the basketball. They have Zion and Zion and Adams in the paint on defense. They have Lonzo and Bledsoe up top for perimeter defense. They have great basketball on both sides of the basketball. The problem is that they just haven't clicked yet. Like JJ Redick hasn't been great shooting off the bench, and JJ Redick not being great shooting is not something that's consistent. And I think Van Gundy's been using them wrong. Finally, the last, 2 weeks of basketball, Lonzo Ball's been terrific for them. He's finally been taking the ball up. He's finally been playing like a point guard should play, and he has learned to shoot a little bit better. I think he will be a 40% shooter from three at some point in his career. I think that this team has the talent on both sides of the basketball, and the Mavericks just don't. So I think that eventually over time in this season, it will click, and that's why I have the Pelicans going to the playoffs over the Mavericks. If I had to choose between the two, I don't know if I
think that's fair. I think that's fair. Both of these teams have to make adjustments. They also need to figure out how to come together as a team and make the final push, because they kind of seem disconnected from last year where we had high hopes for them, especially the Pelicans. Honestly, I'm going to rescind that, because I think the Pelicans might have more upside in this season because it might be an easier fix for them, where the Mavericks are lacking in something like defense. That's not really something you can just pick up in a couple games.
So what you're saying is I'm a convincer, but the next thing I want to talk about is Ben Simmons and LaMelo Ball. This has actually been not a trending topic, but a topic that NBA social media, NBA fans like to talk about because their games are fairly similar, and that is, which one would you rather have for the future, Ben Simmons or LaMelo Ball? Personally, okay. I'm going to start this because I'm the biggest non-Big Baller brand founded. I'm just a Hornets fan who loves the game of LaMelo Ball, and I love the game of Ben Simmons too. I love the game that he has right now. My only problem with him is that he hasn't changed it at all. That's why I have to pick LaMelo here. It's not bias. Like, of course, there's obviously going to be bias in the things I say, but generally, and I think a lot of people agree with this, is that LaMelo Ball has already shown improvements in his game through the start of the 30 games he's played in the season. Ben Simmons has been in the league 3 or 4 years. He hasn't improved at all. Like his stats, like his defense, like a little bit, like he's gotten like smarter on defense, but he hasn't been shooting the ball. He hasn't even been aggressive scoring the ball at all. His points per game is down this season. And I get that he plays elite defense. That's the reason that makes this close, is that he plays elite defense. LaMelo Ball is not no elite defender at all. He's a decent defender. But really, if I'm looking for the next 5 years, next 10 years, I want LaMelo Ball because he's shown so much improvement over his basketball career. And Ben Simmons hasn't improved at all. He's just been big. He's just had his skill set that he came into the NBA with, and he's stayed with it.
Yeah, Ben, it's actually quite alarming. He literally has not improved at all. Like, at all. Like, his stats are almost exactly the same as they were in 2017 when he first came into the league. Like, in his 4 years, almost 4 years, he really just has not improved. It's actually stunning. Like, maybe you've seen small improvements that don't show up on the stat sheet. But, I mean, look, honestly, I hate to say this. I hate to agree with Ben on this one. I'm taking LaMelo Ball. He has much more upside. He does. His shooting is way better, obviously. That's been a big criticism. His numbers are way better. I think he's honestly a better player. He's passing really well. There are not as many holes in his game than there are with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons, we're just waiting for him to improve. We've been waiting since he got into the league. I remember his second season, people were like, oh, now he's going to improve. Third season, now he's going to improve. How much longer do we have to wait until he can pick up his numbers from like 16 points a game? Come on.
Okay, no, I think
I'll get into this.
Just to jump in just real quick, I think one thing that NBA Twitter, NBA social media has been talking about for a while is like every season it's been like, this year Wiggins is going to take the step, this year Ben Simmons is going to take the step, and every offseason it's just been compared, like those two are going to take the next step. And now Andrew Wiggins beat him to the job, which is absolutely hilarious to me. But Arjun, I know you're a big Ben Simmons guy.
Well, I'm not a big Ben Simmons guy at all. By no means, I do like him. I think he's overhated by the media, that's for sure. But I'm going to pick Ben Simmons here, and it's obviously a debate because I can see why you guys are saying Melo. It's not some biased thing to say. I mean, he's playing really well in his first year, but I'm going to say Simmons because his potential, if he shoots more, which is something that can be changed. It is not something that is. It's not about skill based. It's not about, how good of a player you are. It's tendencies, and tendencies can easily be changed with the right coach. If you have him on a different team, that can easily be changed. If you're if you say Brett Brown has instilled the idea that Ben Simmons, you are not going to shoot that much. We're going to pass to Embiid. If Doc Rivers says that, if he says that Ben Simmons is just playing his role, and I think that if you want to build around him, right now he's at a 20% usage rate. You bring that up to 30%, you bring him to maybe a little higher than that. What are the odds that his stats are going to go a lot higher? I mean, if you watch him play, he can just bull out his players. I don't want to be the type of person to say that he's going to shoot, like he's going to get better at shooting, because likeliness that he's going to get better at shooting is pretty high.
Okay, so the reason
he's a great shooter, but that's going to be part of his arsenal. And I mean, before I let you talk, I think that Ben Simmons has potential to be a 25-point per game score if he shoots more, and that can be changed.
Okay, and I get that because like Ben Simmons, I'm not going to sit here and rat on Ben Simmons because he won't shoot, he can't shoot, he won't be aggressive, because I'm one that says that he doesn't even need to shoot three-pointers, he just needs to be aggressive with the basketball. The thing is, Brett Brown wasn't sitting there saying just pass to Embiid. Brett Brown came out to the media when he was the head coach of the 76ers and saying, I've been begging him to shoot. Jimmy Butler fined him when he didn't, or no, that was Embiid. That's my bad. But like, seriously, he's been told to shoot his entire career and he just refuses. And it's fine. Like, if he doesn't want to shoot, if he doesn't want to be aggressive, he just wants to be a pass first guard who averages no more than 15 points per game his entire career. That's fine. That's him. But really, if I'm picking a guy for the next 5 years, 7 years to build around, I think the main, like before the draft, it was a better question because people were like, oh, well, LaMelo shot 22% on jump shots in Australia this season as a starter. And I think it's been about 10 games roughly now. So it's a decent sample size in my opinion. I mean, LaMelo Ball as a starter is averaging about like 22, 6, and 6 on really good efficiency. He's shooting the ball really well, and he's shooting it with confidence. LaMelo Ball has shown his work ethic, and comparing that to Ben Simmons obviously works hard to keep his body in shape and stay the amazing defender and playmaker that he is, but really they're about the same size. They have about the exact same offensive arsenal, minus the fact that LaMelo Ball
size, Ben Simmons is a lot bigger. Not height-wise, but he is a lot bigger.
Yeah, he's probably like 30, 40 pounds bigger than LaMelo Ball. That's a way easier fix to add on weight for LaMelo Ball, and also something that it actually adds to his game to not be 240 pounds.
Yeah, I mean, they're not the same. Ben Simmons is a much different player. Look, comparing them, I don't know if he's in the wrong system, but he's not being played to his full potential. Whether you chalk that up to playing with Embiid or wrong coaching, wrong team, whatever you chalk that up to, you have to give credit to Ben Simmons. He's consistently hasn't changed at all. He has averaged 8 assists per game. It's very impressive. He's a great passer. He's great on defense. I agree with Arjun. He can be scoring upwards of like 20 points if he's in the right system right now. But you're still waiting for him to make have some like forward thinking about your career or something. Like,
and I see that's the thing.
Have the coach use you better? Like he can get there. Whatever is wrong with him, he has to get there soon. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck at the same
stat. You have to take into the fact that LaMelo Ball is only 19 years old, and he's putting. And in no cases do I think that overall Ben Simmons is worse than LaMelo Ball right now, because of course he's probably second or third, maybe even first in defensive player of the year rankings right now, and he's a great playmaker. And when he's aggressive, he's a great scorer. He could be a great scorer when it comes to finishing at the rim, but he doesn't. And I think that he's a better player than LaMelo Ball right now. But LaMelo Ball is 19 years old, putting up better offensive numbers than Ben Simmons, arguably. And he's shown that he has the confidence. He shows that he works on the shot and he wants to get it better. Even on nights where he's shooting 0 for 6 from 3, he'll shoot a 7th one with ease, even if it's from half court, because he wants to get better. We haven't seen that from Ben Simmons, and that's why I personally would rather have LaMelo Ball, because he shows that he wants to improve. And the next thing I want to talk about is the Atlanta Hawks and John Collins. I think at the start of the season, John Collins wasn't extended on a larger contract by the Atlanta Hawks, and he will be a restricted free agent this offseason. And apparently now the Atlanta Hawks are looking to trade him. The reason they didn't sign him to an extension earlier was that they didn't want to give him the max because they don't think he's worth it. So, Isaac, do you think it's smart for the Hawks to look to trade Collins at this point?
I don't think so. Out of their upsides as a team, as a young team, I think he's one of their best players. I think it's stupid to trade him at this point, especially when they're in a transitioning year where they're kind of in between, not tanking, but in between doing poorly and making the playoffs. They're one of those many teams in the NBA that's in between there. I think it's stupid. That's going to be blowing up your team, really. He's one of their core guys. He's averaging very good statistics. And I just think it's dumb. I think he has good chemistry with the guys that are already on the Hawks right now. I think it's not fair to trade him at this point, because that's just kind of throwing a bomb into the Hawks where they're already in a transitioning year where they're trying to get to the playoffs.
But the thing is that if you look at chemistry, John Collins is not having it. If anything, he's going to show doesn't have good chemistry with them, because there have been several recent reports that he has not been happy with Trae Young's play style. If you look at the team as a whole, I'll keep this brief so that Ben can go. But if you look at the team, the franchise as a whole, they have invested so much money in their bench players, their aging bench players. Gallinari has been given a lot of money to put up 13 points per game on the bench. And it's not about the numbers, it's about the fact that his role on the bench, and it's about the fact that they're paying him that much money to be a bench player. And if you look at the possibilities of trading Collins for, say, a draft pick, a very high draft pick, you get a lot of upside, you get a low contract, and that would help them a lot because they are in a crisis right now.
Mm-hmm. So the Atlanta Hawks are just starting this off. So if you're listening and you think that I think that they should trade John Collins, that don't think that, because I think originally if I was a GM and I was thinking, okay, I have John Collins, he's 23 years old and he's putting up 20 and 10 on 50, 40, 90. No, I'm not going to trade that. But generally from the standpoint that they're at, there's not a good relationship between them and Collins. Collins wants to be on an offense of his own, and they have the guy who they want to be their offense, Trae Young. That's a thing of their own. They could still bring him back, though. He would have still wanted a contract. But coming into this season, John Collins coming off a 2010, 50% from the field, shooting almost 40% from three. You signed Danilo Gallinari to $20 million, who's already a great power forward. You draft Onyeka Okongwu on top of that. You show that you don't really respect the future and the growth of John Collins. The reason they did that I really don't think they do is because he's not a great defender at the 5. I don't get why they don't really love him that much. But then you come in, you don't want to pay him the max contract after signing Danilo Gallinari, after drafting another power forward in Onyeka Okongwu. You're just showing that you don't want John Collins for the long run. And if you're not going to pay him the max contract, then because they're not going to pay him the max contract. At this point, I say they have to trade him because you don't want to pull a Celtics. I'm sorry, guys, but you want to get value back for guys that are going to walk. You want to trade John Collins, maybe trade him to the Bulls for Lauri Markkanen, maybe trade him somewhere, maybe trade him and picks, get somebody even better. Just no matter what it is, the worst thing you can do with a 23-year-old who you could have extended, who's averaging 20 and 10, is let him walk in free agency. You at least, with all the poverty things you've done to John Collins and how you didn't want to extend him to a max contract because you don't think he's worth it, at least get value for him if you're going to let him walk.
Yeah, I mean, he is not worth a max contract. You can give the Hawks for that one.
What?
But yeah, he's not worth a max contract at this point.
I think I wouldn't bet.
No. In terms of think about the guys that you're talking about trading him for. You just talked about trading him for Lauri Markkanen or a draft pick. Like, do you think a max contract player is going to get that? No. Look, if they're going to trade him, they're going to have to get more out of him than that. Otherwise, the other team is getting a way better deal, giving away stuff that you guys just mentioned. And I think he's kind of in a bad place right now where teams aren't willing to give up that much for him, and they're going to get back more in any of those situations. But you're definitely right in saying the Hawks cannot let him walk. That's for sure a Celtics situation, but he is not worth a max contract.
Okay, no. If you're thinking about the long run, if you're a competent general manager in the slightest, and a guy who's of course, if you wanted to get him for a team-friendly deal, that would be great. But if there's a 23-year-old averaging the numbers that he's been averaging, and he has the room to grow, and you can get him over time to be better at defending at the 5 position, then obviously you pay him the max contract. It's not to if he's worth it. Like, do you think Rudy Gobert was worth having the 3rd biggest contract in NBA history? No. But did the Jazz have to do that? Yes, they had to do that because they couldn't go without Rudy Gobert. And I think that's what the Hawks had to do, and they didn't do it. So at this point, you have to trade him. And I mean, at a situation where he's an expiring contract on a restricted deal still, and he wants out, his value isn't as high as he actually is. Maybe, of course, Lauri Markkanen is worse than him, but you could get maybe a 1st-round pick out of that because he has a much brighter potential than Lauri Markkanen does. But in general, at this point, with all the fuckery you've done to John Collins, you have to trade John Collins. So you don't let him walk and pay him. And if he signs a max contract with, say the Pistons went and got him on a max contract, then you would just have to live with him walking, and I just can't.
They're not in any situation. The Hawks are not in a good place here. I think with their whole roster, I think Trae Young is wildly overrated still, even if he doesn't have as much attention as he has in seasons past. But I think the Hawks are in a weird situation right now. They thought that they could be good. Teams like the Hornets, even the Knicks, are putting up much better numbers, playing much better games than they are. But the bottom line, I have to agree with you guys, is that they have to get something out of this deal. Even if they're on the losing end of the trade, they have to get something out of it.
Yeah, you've gone past let's repair this. If you've already done all this bad shit to him, I think you got to move on, but you have to trade him before it gets to the Deshaun Watson point of trading. I don't think it'll get there, but you got to think in the future if you're a general manager. You can't be thinking now.
It is sad to see because he's one of their best young players.
He's their second best player and their second best young player for their future. Clint Capella is great, but John Collins is the Robin of their future if they could keep him. But of course, at this point, they really just don't want to. But the next and last basketball thing we want to talk about today is Blake Griffin. And my question to you guys is, do you think Blake Griffin is still worth trading for with his 2 years remaining, 36 to next year, $39 million contract? Is he worth trading for, Isaac?
All right. I'm gonna take a little bit of a controversial stance on this one, and I'm gonna say that Blake Griffin is worth trading for. I think when you look at Blake Griffin's career, it's pretty disappointing that he hasn't done better. You can't chalk it up to his own personal failure. Injuries have just been giving him blow after blow, season after season. He hasn't played well in the Pistons recently, but this is why I think that he can deserve that money, because if you can lock him down, you can still get some more years out of him, maybe for less money. Even if, like, look at what we just talked about with John Collins. Does he deserve that money that he might be getting with a max contract? No, but you're locking him down because that's what you need to do to get a player that can help out your team. Blake Griffin can certainly help out a team right now. Maybe the money is not worth it for him, but I think he can still have upside in his career. He's not totally done. If he's healthy, he can still play well.
I'm going to keep this brief because I know Arjun wants to talk, but I've heard a lot from you about Blake Griffin in the past, but I think that Blake Griffin, he's averaging 12-5 on really bad efficiency this year, and from the eye test too, he's just not Blake Griffin. I mean, he hasn't dunked since March 2019, was it? I mean, he's just not the Blake Griffin we used to know and love. But really, he could, if you just canceled out money, if this was a NBA 2K My League, no salary cap at all, then yes, Blake Griffin is absolutely worth trading for. But you're living in a world where if you're a team that, say you're a team like the Trailblazers, if you were to go to trade for Blake Griffin, you would have to give up guys like maybe Nurkic, or if you were the Raptors trying to trade for him, even the Raptors trying to trade for Andre Drummond, they need to make up $28 million. They would have to give up Norman Powell, and they would have to give up guys like Chris Boucher, who are very valuable to their team. So when you stack up all the people to equivalent to the $39 million that you'd be trading for in Blake Griffin, you would have to make up a lot of money in those trades, which is a lot of valuable pieces to your team for a guy putting up 12-5 who you don't know could come back, since he looks washed like compared to his old days.
I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with you, Ben. The problem is that you compared him to John Collins. See, John Collins is young. He's young. He's putting up great stats. It's the exact opposite situation with Blake Griffin, because and it doesn't matter how long that contract is. Anytime you're paying a guy that much money who's putting up terrible, like just all right numbers, but terrible efficiency. Anytime you're giving him that much money in a single year, maybe it's disappointing. It's a terrible look. And just looking at him, you said yourself, he hasn't dunked in a very long time. His injuries have really just deteriorated him, and it's not his fault exactly, because it's injuries. It's not a lot you can do to prevent that. But if you just look at him, what he'll do to your franchise, the money, the market he'll leave on your franchise is not worth it at all.
Yeah, no, Blake Griffin, like if he's making 10, 12, maybe even $15 million, that would be worth it, because like you could see a team like the Hawks, like not in a John Collins way, but like if they didn't have John Collins, you go ahead and trade Tony Snell and a second round pick just so they can get him off their hands. And if he was making $15 million, that would be worth it, because you can be like, hey, maybe he could return to somewhat of old Blake, because he has been held back by injuries even this year. You could hope he gets back to somewhat of a player, but even if he gets back to like above average role player form, he's making $40 million next year. And that holds back the team, not on the court, but it holds you back from signing actual good players, keeping actual good players. And as a general manager, that's not worth it to me. If he gets bought out, absolutely. If I'm the Nets, if I'm the Heat especially, if I'm even like the Clippers, the Lakers, I'm going out and I'm like, hey, can I get you to $5 million a year? Then I would absolutely do that for those GMs. But really, with his money that he's making, he's just not worth trading for.
Yeah, I think that's fair. In the best case scenario for a team that's trying to get him is that he gets bought out, certainly. But even when you look at his money, I know it seems a little bit outlandish, maybe a lot outlandish to say this stuff, but I think it's also about a mindset, because it's hard. This is sort of like a similar situation to what Melo went through, and we've seen him make a comeback. And I think it's similar in the sense that you're going from a star player role to just dropping down to someone who needs to understand what their role is. And look, the Pistons just aren't good in general. I think out of all of the teams in the NBA, that there must be a spot for Blake Griffin, because his career is not over. I think maybe it's a little bit of my own personal bias. Sad to see him go, but I think that there has to be a spot for Blake Griffin now.
Yeah, he can still contribute about 20 minutes a game to a contender. I think that's the most you can get out of him for good production.
If he can
There's not a lot left in those knees to play basketball in general. I mean, Derrick Rose said that there's barely enough in his knees, and he's having a great season. I think that Blake Griffin, if he was bought out, he would be a great target, but generally he's just not worth it money wise, and you can't trade $40 million worth of players in hopes that a guy can return to old form, because you don't know if he would. And I mean, athleticism is half of his game. That's half of the reason that he's valuable to a team, and he doesn't have his old athleticism anymore. But and the last thing I want to talk about is Deshaun Watson, going back and just totally talking about him, and that is, where is his best landing spot?
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, so I think there's lots of different names that have been thrown out there. Let me throw out the Carolina Panthers. They're one of the biggest names that has been talked about. Can they deal Christian McCaffrey to get him? I think that is worth it for them, because they did show some promise in some areas of their game. They have to upgrade. I think Deshaun Watson would fit in very well for them. Lots of, like we talked about in the last topic, lots of teams are talking about going all in for Deshaun Watson because, you know, there's all these trade rumors about him. I think the Panthers would be a good landing place for him. Yes, you might have to give up Christian McCaffrey. Maybe it's not the best move for the Panthers, but I think in the long run, I think it is still a good move for them. Even if they have to give up Christian McCaffrey, he's going to be a huge asset to your team. I think he could fit in really well with them.
I think, yeah. So for the Panthers, I think, just before I get to really who I think is the best landing spot for him, I think the Panthers, if you don't give up Christian McCaffrey, that is Deshaun Watson's dreamland, because you have Christian McCaffrey, who's, you're not only like, there's the big ask that, like, you don't win Super Bowls with super high paid running backs like Christian McCaffrey, but also he does kind of fit the role of a receiver as well. And that's a big thing about him, is how elite he is in both sides of a running back's game. But you also have Robbie Anderson. You also have DJ Moore. You also have the chance to maybe even franchise tag or bring back, if the market's not too big, on Curtis Samuel. That offense is elite. But if you have to give up Christian McCaffrey, I don't like that situation as much as other teams for Deshaun Watson, because I think one of the big reasons Deshaun would like to go to Carolina is because he gets to have the backfield of Christian McCaffrey alongside him. But the team I think would suit him best and would be the best for him trade-wise is the Miami Dolphins. Now, I hate that all Miami sports fans love having every star going to their team. Heat, Dolphins, any other sport. I don't really follow the other sports as much. But truly, I think that the Dolphins would be the best situation for him, because they can trade the Texans pick, and they can trade their first-round pick, because they're a good team. Their third overall pick that they have available to trade isn't their pick. It's the Texans pick. They're a good team. They had, even with the quarterback flip-flop of Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tua Tagovailoa, they have great assets to flip. They have Tua Tagovailoa to trade. And then they have just an overall great team. They could afford to get some more weapons, like maybe Curtis Samuel this offseason or other receivers to bring to Miami with Deshaun Watson. But in general, they have a great team. They have a lot. They have an overabundance of assets, unlike Carolina, to go and get Deshaun Watson. I think that's why that's the best scenario for him, because he wouldn't have to give up as much.
But they already have two quarterbacks. Do you really think it's worth it? Two good quarterbacks that both played last season. Do you think it's worth it for them to give up things for Deshaun Watson?
I mean, Tua, I think I've gone in depth a lot on this show about Tua Tagovailoa, but I think that he has a lot of trade value. His market is huge. I don't think he's that impressive. I think if you can get Deshaun Watson, who's already maybe even a top 3 quarterback, but defined top 5 quarterback, you absolutely go get him, because you trade Tua, you trade him in that deal, and it makes you give up less first-round picks. Maybe it's Tua and 3 first-round picks, maybe even 4 if you have to get that done. But truly, if you trade Tua for Deshaun Watson in some sort of form, that's amazing. That's a great deal for you, because you get a top 5 quarterback. Maybe you could develop Tua into some great quarterback. Dolphins fans don't want to trade Tua, but I say if you have that opportunity, jump on it, because then you have a glorified top 5 quarterback instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tua Tagovailoa last season, who barely missed the playoffs off of 1 game. You add Deshaun Watson to the equation, and this team is a bona fide playoff team.
Yeah.
I definitely, before I get into my take, I'll speak on both years. I think Isaac definitely, he would flourish for the Panthers. And at the end of the day, there is the take that Christian McCaffrey, a guy like him, a running back, won't be the biggest impact to a team as long as you have a good offensive line. But with a guy like CMC, who can receive and rush like he can, he would be definitely a great asset with them. And I love that Carolina offense. Along with that, you didn't even mention Deebo Samuel. They have 2 Samuels that I think are 2 really solid young receivers. And then I think the the Dolphins, that two quarterback thing was never going to be sustainable. You cannot keep doing that. You cannot keep switching to out in the clutch. You're just never going to develop him. So my team that I'm going to say that Deshaun Watson would be best in would be the 49ers. I think the 49ers would be a great fit because at the end of the day, you have a lot of defensive, like talent on the team that you could trade. You have a Super Bowl ready team. This is a defense, the best defense in the league. Maybe not the best defense, but the best D-line in the league. There's no doubt about that. Fred Warner, one of the best middle linebackers. And you just look at this offense, Deshaun Watson would complete their team. They have, with Deshaun Watson, you have a great quarterback. You've got a solid young wide receiver in Brandon Ayuk. And then you have Raheem Mostert, who will carry his load on the running game.
All right, no. So the Niners have been talked about a lot as a team that's going to take a big jump alongside the Carolina Panthers and the Miami Dolphins. And a lot of people think that because, in 2018, 2019, they were in the Super Bowl and they had this great defense. And their great defense is either at this point already left, been injured, or for the most part, or they're a free agent this offseason. A lot of their great defense is already left, or it has a big chance to leave this offseason. And there's only so much cap space. If you're going to keep this defense together, they don't have Robert Saleh anymore, so they don't have that wizard of a man in the office doing the deals for them. But I think that the Niners are really overrated for the next season because we don't know how good they're going to be next season. Their defense could be a drastic change to what it was last season. That's why I stick with the Dolphins or maybe the Panthers. I think the Jets are a good trade target if they were to make a ton of moves to build around Deshaun Watson, but right now their team is atrocious. So they have the most draft capital to trade for him, the most valuable draft capital, but that goes with the fact that their team is terrible. But
the thing is that the Texans aren't a very smart front office either. You can obviously, like Richard Sherman himself, he's getting older. He's not the same cornerback as he used to be. You could definitely do something. You could obviously, I think you could include Richard Sherman.
Sherman's a free agent. Like most of their defense is free agents. So in reality, they don't have a lot of trade stuff to deal with here. And that's why I don't see them being great next season because their defense and all their players are really in shambles in free agency. I don't see them getting back to the playoffs next year, which is a bold take that a lot of the football internet will be mad at me for. But let's end on that note so I don't go a little too crazy. It's been a great episode. If you're still watching, go ahead and like and subscribe for more episodes. And soon, maybe even this episode, there will be a separate channel for each clip of each episode being posted individually. This is the channel that you're watching right now for full episodes. And we'll catch you guys later. Peace.